Welcome back to my story. If you have been with me until now, you saw how a cold surrogacy contract turned into a forbidden and dangerous passion between me and my cousin, the powerful Catherine. We had just experienced an intense moment in the kitchen, an almost kiss that made it clear we were no longer just employer and employee. I went to bed that stormy night, with my heart racing with hope, never imagining that life was about to deal us a brutal blow. What I thought was just the sound of rain outside was actually the prelude to a silent disaster happening inside my own body. And that was how our world collapsed. The sound of thunder that woke me hours earlier now seemed like a distant warning that the world was about to crash down on my head. I woke up not from the noise of the storm still punishing the windows, but from sharp, cold pain in my lower abdomen, a violent cramp that made me instinctively curl into a fetal position. I tried to take a deep breath, thinking it was just indigestion caused by the late-night sandwich, but the sensation of warm wetness between my legs brought a cold and immediate dread. With trembling hands, I pushed aside the heavy duvet and touched the sheet, bringing my fingers to the dim light of the lamp I had left on. The scream got stuck in my throat when I saw the bright red staining my skin, a brutal and terrifying contrast against the immaculate whiteness of the luxury bed where I slept. "Catherine!" I screamed, my voice coming out strangled by the crying that was already starting to well up, panic taking over every cell of my body. I did not need to scream a second time. In a matter of seconds, the bedroom door was thrown open with violence, revealing Catherine still awake, as if she were on duty waiting for the tragedy. She ran in, barefoot on the rug, her face pale like someone who already anticipated the worst. When her eyes met the bloodstain on the sheets, I saw the Iron Woman shatter into 1,000 pieces. She stopped abruptly, bringing her hands to her mouth, her black eyes wide in absolute terror that mirrored mine. "No, no, no," she murmured repeatedly, running to the bed without caring about dirtying her expensive silk robe in that nightmare scenario. She did not call the housekeeper, did not call the driver, did not waste time with protocols. Catherine simply wrapped me in the stained sheets and helped me up, supporting all my weight. "We are going to the hospital now," she said, her voice trembling but loaded with a fierce urgency, while dragging me down the hall. I was crying copiously, apologizing, feeling that I had failed, that my body had betrayed the agreement and killed her dream. "Shut up, Julia, just breathe," she ordered. But there was no anger in her tone, only raw desperation. We went down the stairs with difficulty, and I felt the blood flow with every step. A physical sensation of life draining away that made me dizzy and nauseous. Upon reaching the garage, Catherine put me in the passenger seat of her sports car, ignoring the armored and comfortable sedan we used with the driver. She took the wheel with a manic fury, starting the engine that roared loud in the silent garage, and peeled out screeching tires, exiting into the stormy night like a rocket. The rain fell like a solid curtain, transforming the streets into dangerous rivers, but Catherine drove as if she were possessed, cutting through the sparse early morning traffic, running red lights without hesitation. I held my belly with both hands, praying to any god who would listen, asking that the little heart I heard days ago would not stop beating. I looked to the side and saw a Catherine that the business world would never know, hair stuck to her forehead by cold sweat, knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel so hard, lips bitten almost to the point of bleeding. She was not worried about the company Heir. I saw on her face the fear of losing someone, the fear of death, the fear of being alone again. "Hold on, Julia. Do not dare close your eyes," she shouted over the noise of the rain and the engine, reaching out her right hand to hold mine with a force that almost crushed my bones. That touch was my only anchor, the electric current keeping me conscious while the pain increased and the world spun around me. We arrived at the private hospital emergency room in record time, and Catherine braked the car haphazardly at the entrance, abandoning it with the door open in the middle of the access ramp. She ran to the passenger side and pulled me out, screaming for help with a voice that echoed through the empty lobby, authoritative and desperate at the same time. Nurses ran in our direction with a gurney, and I was laid down quickly, seeing the white ceiling lights pass fast over my head as I was taken inside. Catherine ran beside the gurney, holding my hand until the last permitted second, her eyes fixed on mine, silently promising she would fix this, that she would buy the baby's health if necessary. The double doors of the surgical center closed, separating us, and the last image I had was of Catherine standing in the hallway, barefoot, with her robe stained with blood and her face bathed in tears, looking like the smallest and most fragile woman in the world. I was surrounded by doctors, muffled voices, the sound of machines being turned on, the cold of the gel on my belly once again. Time lost its meaning. Minutes or hours could have passed while they examined, cleaned, and medicated, searching for the vital beat in the middle of the silence of my womb. I closed my eyes, exhausted, feeling the effect of light sedatives pulling me to a place without pain, where I did not need to face the reality of the imminent miscarriage. I woke up in a private room, silent and dimly lit, feeling my body heavy and sore, but strangely calm. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor beside me was the most beautiful music I had ever heard, confirming there were still 2 hearts beating in that room. I tried to move, but a warm hand on mine stopped me. I turned my face slowly and saw Catherine sitting in an uncomfortable armchair beside the bed, still in the same clothes from the night before, her red and swollen eyes fixed on me. She seemed to have aged in 10 years that night, all her aura of invincibility drained by fear. "You're okay. The baby is okay," she said before I could ask, her voice hoarse and cracking. It was a partial placental abruption, she explained, using medical terms she must have memorized in the last hour, but we managed to reverse it. The doctor said it was close, very close. She took a deep breath, a trembling sound, and pressed my hand against her cheek, closing her eyes as if thanking for a miracle. I stayed looking at her, at that powerful woman reduced to an exhausted guardian by my side, and felt a wave of love so strong it hurt more than the cramp. "Do not give me another scare like that, Julia," she whispered, opening black eyes that were now full of liquid tenderness. "I thought I had lost you," she confessed, and the plural came out natural, without corrections. It was no longer the baby, it was us. I squeezed her hand back, weak but determined. "We are here, Catherine," I replied, and she leaned forward, resting her forehead on my hand, hiding her face to cry silently. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside us had swept away all remaining defenses. The doctor entered the room shortly after, surprised to see the owner of the Lumiere clinic in that deplorable situation, but wise enough not to comment. He explained that I would need absolute bed rest for the next few weeks. No stress, no effort, bed and bathroom privileges only. Catherine listened to everything, nodding frantically, transforming medical orders into sacred laws she would defend with her life. When we were alone again, she stood up, adjusted the wrinkled robe, and tried to recover a bit of lost dignity. But it was too late. I had already seen her naked soul. "I will have clean clothes brought and handle the admission," she said, walking to the door, but stopped before leaving, hand on the doorknob. "Julia," she called without turning around. I looked at her back, at the tense posture. "I have never driven a car barefoot in my life," she blurted out, a random sentence carrying a huge weight of meaning. I smiled weakly, feeling the tears return. "Thank you for saving me," I said, She stayed silent for a second, then whispered, "You are the one saving me." She left, leaving me alone with the sound of the heart monitor. But her presence filled the entire room. I knew that, from that day on, nothing would be like before. The fear of loss had accelerated everything, burned the stages of our emotional slow burn. Catherine had crossed the city in the rain for me, had dirtied her hands with blood and cried in front of strangers. The surrogacy contract had dissolved in that puddle of blood on the car floor. Now, it was just a story of two women fighting to keep alive the only thing uniting them, while desperately trying not to admit they could no longer live without each other. The return from the hospital transformed the mansion into a true intensive care fortress, where my every step was monitored as if I carried a ticking time bomb and not a baby. Catherine installed her office in the living room so as not to lose sight of me for even a second, swapping in-person meetings for silent video conferences, where she spoke softly so as not to disturb my rest. The weeks dragged on in a blur of soft pillows, herbal teas, and doctor house calls, while my belly grew to proportions that defied gravity. We reached the 8th month with nerves on edge, living in a bubble of forced intimacy where the air always seemed charged with static electricity, ready to explode with any spark. That scare in the rainy early morning had broken the formal barriers between us, but now we were on swampy ground, not knowing how to act in the face of excessive proximity. On a stuffy night, typical of late summer, I was lying on the living room sofa, surrounded by a mountain of cushions that failed miserably to accommodate my immense and aching body. My ankles were swollen like loaves of bread. My back throbbed in a constant rhythm, and heartburn burned my throat, physical reminders that the deadline was approaching. Catherine was sitting on the fluffy rug next to the sofa, surrounded by papers and spreadsheets, working on the floor to be at the same level as me, in a gesture of silent solidarity that moved me. She had abandoned the rigid suits at home, now wearing linen pants and loose blouses, her hair tied in a loose bun that let rebellious strands escape, humanizing the unreachable goddess. I let out an involuntary groan trying to change position, feeling a sharp pang in my lower back, and Catherine dropped the documents immediately, getting on her knees in an instant reflex of protection. "What do you feel?" she asked, black eyes scanning my face for signs of danger, hand already reaching for the cell phone to call the doctor. "It is just back pain, Catherine. The weight is unbearable," I complained, feeling frustrated and ugly, a beached whale on my rich cousin's designer sofa. She sighed, relieved it wasn't another emergency, and put the phone away, but didn't go back to her papers. She stayed looking at me with an indecipherable expression, biting her full lower lip. "Turn on your side. Let me help," she commanded. But the voice didn't have the authority of before. It was soft, almost a shy request. I obeyed with difficulty, turning my back to her, and felt the sofa sink slightly when she sat on the edge, positioning herself behind me. Her hands landed on my shoulders, firm and warm, and began to massage the tension accumulated in my muscles with surprising skill for someone who claimed never to have taken care of anyone. She went down my back, thumbs pressing the exact pain points, undoing knots with patience, while I let the air out of my lungs in a long sigh of pure relief. Her touch was different from the professional touch of the clinic masseurs. It had intention. It had affection. It had a silent language my body understood perfectly. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of her breathing and the distant ticking of a clock, creating an atmosphere of isolation where only the two of us existed in the universe. Catherine continued the massage for an indefinite time, her hands going down to the base of my spine, brushing dangerously against the waistband of my sweatpants. I closed my eyes, feeling a different heat spread through my body, a wave of desire that shouldn't exist between a hired surrogate and her boss. But the chemistry between us was undeniable, fed by months of stolen glances, extreme care, and the sharing of that life kicking between us. Suddenly, her hand stopped in the middle of my back, motionless, and I felt her breath hit the back of my neck, hot and irregular. I turned my face slowly, finding her eyes dangerously close to mine, so close I could see the small golden specks in her black iris. Catherine did not retreat. Her face was flushed, lips parted, and her gaze traveled from my mouth to my eyes in a vicious cycle of temptation. "You are so strong, Julia. I do not know how you endure all this for me," she whispered, and the voice came out hoarse, loaded with admiration bordering on adoration. "I am not doing it just for you," I replied in a thread of a voice, courage born from the vulnerability of the moment. "I am doing it for us." The word "us" hung in the air, vibrating between our mouths, an explicit invitation to cross the last line separating us. Catherine raised her hand and touched my face, thumb tracing the outline of my lower lip, trembling slightly. I saw the internal battle in her eyes, the fear of losing control fighting against the desperate will to surrender. "Damn the contract," she murmured, more to herself than to me. And then, in a fluid and hungry movement, she closed the distance. Catherine's kiss wasn't soft like I imagined in my dreams. It was intense, desperate, tasting of longing for something we had never lived. Her lips possessed mine with overwhelming urgency, and I responded in kind, bringing my hand to the back of her neck, pulling her closer, wanting to fuse our bodies. I felt her tongue invade my mouth, hot and experienced, exploring every corner, while her hands squeezed my shoulders as if wanting to make sure I was real. It was a kiss of redemption, where all the anguish, fear of childbirth, and loneliness of years were poured into that explosive physical contact. For a glorious minute, we forgot the pregnancy, the age difference, the money, and the kinship. We were just two women finding each other in the middle of chaos. But reality returned as fast as it had gone. Catherine pulled away abruptly, as if waking from a hypnotic trance, eyes wide with panic. She brought her hand to her mouth, covering lips swollen by the kiss, and looked at me with an expression of horror, as if she had committed an unforgivable crime. "My God, what did I do?" she stammered, jumping up from the sofa, tripping over her own feet and the papers scattered on the floor. I remained paralyzed, still feeling her taste in my mouth, heart beating so hard it felt like it would tear my chest. "Catherine, wait," I tried to say, reaching out to her, but she recoiled as if I were fire. "This could not have happened. I am your boss. I am your cousin. You are vulnerable, full of hormones, and I took advantage of that," she shot out, stumbling over words, creating rational excuses to flee from what she felt. She started pacing back and forth in the room, hands on her head, executive posture crumbling before the moral guilt she imposed on herself. "It was not abuse, Catherine. I wanted it as much as you," I argued, trying to sit up. But the heavy belly made movement difficult, increasing my feeling of helplessness. She stopped and looked at me, and I saw tears shining in her eyes, tears of fear. "You do not understand, Julia. I ruin everything I touch," she said with deep bitterness. "I paid you to do a service because I am incapable of having a normal family, and now I am confusing gratitude with desire. I am messing with your head in a delicate moment." She was building the wall again, brick by brick, using self-deprecation as cement to isolate herself from me. "Forget this, please. Let's pretend it was exhaustion," she asked, voice returning to cold and distant in a superhuman effort to regain control of the situation. She gathered the papers from the floor with quick and nervous gestures, without looking in my direction, fleeing the scene of the emotional crime. I am going to work in the office upstairs. I need to check some emails," she lied, for I knew she just needed to run away from me and the truth that kiss had revealed. Catherine left the room almost running, going up the stairs in a hurry, leaving me alone on the sofa with the feeling of abandonment burning on my skin. The kiss that should have been the beginning of everything had become the reason for our imminent end. I stayed there, touching my own lips, feeling the baby kick hard, as if he too were protesting his mother's cowardice. I knew she wasn't confusing gratitude with desire. I felt the passion in her kiss, felt the hunger of a woman who spent her whole life starving for real love. But Catherine was used to controlling everything, and love is the only thing in the world you cannot control, nor buy, nor put in a spreadsheet. She was terrified, and I, trapped in that heavy and dependent body, had no way to run after her to make her see the truth. Night fell heavy on the house, and the silence that settled wasn't of peace. It was of embarrassment and pain. I knew the next few days would be unbearable, that she would go back to treating me like the hired surrogate, hiding behind formality so as not to deal with her own heart. But now I had a secret weapon. I knew the taste of her kiss, and I knew that behind that diamond armor existed a woman who wanted me desperately. The game had changed, and although she had retreated from the battle, I was determined to win the war, before the baby was born and the contract ended forever. The days following the kiss in the living room were marked by an emotional winter that froze every room in the mansion, transforming our temporary home into a minefield of silences and calculated absences. Catherine kept the mute promise to distance herself, erecting again the walls I had taken months to tear down, brick by brick, with brutal efficiency that left me breathless. She stopped having dinner with me, claiming endless meetings or business dinners I knew were invented just to avoid looking at my face. Our interactions were limited to dry and operational text exchanges about vitamin schedules and medical appointments, soulless texts that seemed written by a robot, and not by the woman who had moaned against my mouth days before. I felt like a ghost wandering the halls, carrying her son and her rejection. 2 loads too heavy for a spine already punished by the 9th month. The oil routine, that sacred and intimate moment of our nights, was summarily cancelled without prior notice or explanation. One night, I found the amber glass bottles left at my bedroom door, with an impersonal note instructing me to apply it myself, as she would be too busy reviewing contracts. I held the paper with trembling hands, feeling tears burn my eyes, realizing she was ripping away any trace of physical touch between us. I applied the oil alone, feeling the coldness of my own hands, crying softly while massaging the huge belly, feeling a physical longing for her hands that hurt more than any stretch mark. The baby seemed to sense the change, getting agitated at the times she used to be around, as if he too missed the voice and warmth of the other mother. At the company, the situation was even worse, as the domestic coldness became public and humiliating before employees whispering in corners. Catherine treated me with excessive and icy politeness, referring to me only as Miss Julia in meetings, erasing any trace of familiarity or kinship. She avoided staying in the same room as me, delegating my tasks to other assistants, isolating me in a bubble of inactivity that made me feel useless and disposable. I watched her through the office blinds, impeccable in her perfectly cut suits, face closed in a mask of absolute concentration, pretending the pregnant woman in the next room didn't exist. I knew that was her defense, the survival mode she learned over years of loneliness, but knowing that didn't make the rejection less painful. The worst part wasn't the anger. It was the certainty that our time was running out, slipping through my fingers like fine sand. The probable due date was approaching with the speed of a runaway train, and every passing day was one less day I had beside her. The contract stipulated that, After the birth and the recovery period, I would leave the mansion and assume my position at the company branch, far from Catherine's personal life. I was living in anticipated grief, suffering for the loss of a family I almost had, but which crumbled before even forming completely. I looked at the suitcases I hadn't even fully unpacked and thought about what it would be like to go back to my empty life, leaving behind the baby I learned to love and the woman who stole my heart. On a Sunday afternoon, Matilda, the housekeeper, found me crying in the kitchen while awkwardly trying to make tea to calm my nerves. The elderly lady, who always maintained professional discretion, held my hand and looked at me with compassion that disarmed me. She is stubborn as a mule, girl, but her heart is bleeding as much as yours, she whispered, confirming what I already suspected. Matilda told me she heard Catherine pacing in her room at dawn, saw lights on until sunrise, found empty wine bottles in the office trash. Knowing she was suffering too didn't relieve my pain, but gave me a cruel hope that maybe, just maybe, she would break before me. I tried to confront her one last time, on a night when I found her by chance in the house library, a room she rarely used. Catherine was standing before the window, looking at the dark garden, holding a glass of whiskey so tight it seemed about to shatter the crystal. "Catherine, we need to talk," I said, stopping at the door, feeling the weight of my belly pulling me down. She didn't turn around, kept her back rigid, protected by the gloom. "There is nothing to talk about, Julia. The plan proceeds according to schedule. The hospital is already notified. Everything is ready," she replied, voice metallic and lifeless. "I am not talking about the plan. I am talking about us. About what happened," I insisted, taking a step inside, invading her sanctuary of isolation. "There is no us," she cut in, turning abruptly, face contorted in a mask of defensive fury. "There is a contract, there is a pregnancy, and there is a future where I raise my son and you live your rich and successful life," she shot back, words coming out like bullets. "You will have everything I promised. Money, career, stability. Do not ask me for what I cannot give," she completed. And I saw the shine of tears in her eyes before she looked away. She was offering me the world so she wouldn't have to give me her heart, trying to buy my happiness to compensate for her cowardice. "I do not want your money, Catherine. I want you," I confessed, throwing my last card on the table, stripping my soul right there. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy as lead. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trembling, fighting against herself with all her might. "Please, go to sleep," she whispered, voice broken, defeated. It was the final rejection, proof that her fear was greater than our love. I turned and left the library, dragging my swollen feet, feeling I had lost the war, leaving behind the woman of my life embraced by her millionaire loneliness. I returned to the room feeling exhausted, drained of any vital energy, wanting only to sleep and wake up when it was all over. The baby was quiet, strangely quiet, as if gathering strength for the big arrival. I lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, and thought about what the birth would be like. Would it be a cold medical procedure, with Catherine watching from afar, or would she hold my hand? The uncertainty corroded me. I had accepted being a surrogate to save my family from poverty, but now I would give everything I had to go back in time and not have answered that phone, if I knew it would hurt so much to love someone unreachable. I fell into a restless sleep, full of confused dreams where I ran through infinite corridors trying to reach Catherine, but she always disappeared in the fog. I woke up at dawn with a strange sensation, pressure in the lower back radiating to the front. different from any pain I had ever felt. I sat up in bed, confused, and felt sudden wetness between my legs, followed by warm liquid flowing abundantly onto the sheets. My water had broken. It wasn't like in the movies. There was no immediate panic, just crystal clear clarity that time was up. I got up slowly, feeling water run down my legs, and then the first real contraction hit me with the force of a punch, taking the air from my lungs and making me double over on my knees beside the bed. The pain was overwhelming, primitive, a wave coming from the gut and taking over everything. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and looked at the digital clock. 3 in the morning. It was time. The contract was about to be fulfilled. The baby was coming to claim his place in the world and definitively separate our paths. I walked with difficulty to the door, leaning on the walls, leaving a wet trail on the luxury corridor floor. I stopped in front of Catherine's bedroom door and hesitated. That would be the last time I would call her mine, the last time I would need her. The next contraction came stronger, tearing a loud moan from my throat that ripped the silence of the sleeping house. I didn't need to knock. I heard the sound of feet running inside, and the door burst open. Catherine was there, in pajamas, hair disheveled, and eyes wide with fear and expectation. "It is happening," I managed to say through clenched teeth, holding the door frame so as not to fall. She said nothing, didn't recite contract clauses, didn't call lawyers. She simply scooped me up in her arms before I collapsed, holding me with that desperate strength I knew so well. Her look changed instantly. The coldness disappeared, the fear disappeared, leaving only fierce determination. "Let's bring our son into the world," she said, and the use of "our" was the only thing that gave me strength to walk to the car. The farewell might be close, but in that early morning, she was mine again, and nothing else mattered but the life we were about to meet. The trip to the hospital was a blur of city lights passing by the car window at high speed, mixed with my moans of pain I could no longer repress. Catherine drove with one hand on the wheel, and the other holding mine so tight my fingers went numb. But that pressure was the only thing keeping me sane in the middle of the hurricane. She talked to me the whole time, short and disconnected sentences, promising everything would be okay, that we were almost there, that I was stronger than I imagined. For the first time, her voice didn't have that controlled command tone. It was full of fear and adrenaline, the voice of a common woman facing the unknown. When the car stopped at the emergency entrance, she didn't wait for nurses. She got out of the car screaming for help, completely ignoring she was in pajamas and with disheveled hair in the middle of a public place. I was put in a wheelchair and rushed through white corridors smelling of ether and anxiety, seeing the ceiling pass fast over my head like a sped-up movie. The pain of contractions came in gigantic waves, breaking over my body and drowning me in agony that seemed endless, stealing my breath and ability to think rationally. Catherine ran beside the chair, holding my hand as if it were her lifeline, threatening any employee who dared delay filling out admission forms. She, who always valued discretion and etiquette, was causing a scene at reception, demanding the best room, best team, and immediate attention for the mother of her son. I looked at her through tears of pain and saw a lioness defending her cub, stripped of any vanity, focused only on survival. We entered the pre-delivery room, and the raw biological reality of birth took over the environment, sweeping away any remnant of the aseptic luxury we lived in at the mansion. Nurses helped me put on the hospital gown, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, my body transformed into a battlefield where life fought to pave the way. Catherine remained there, motionless in a corner, watching everything with wide eyes, pale face reflecting the shock of seeing physical suffering so close. I was afraid she would feel disgust, that the imperfection of blood, sweat, and fluids would make her retreat back to her world of perfect aesthetics. But when a new contraction made me scream and arch my back on the bed, she ran to my side, held my face with both hands, and rested her forehead on mine. "Look at me, Julia. Breathe with me," she asked, ignoring the sweat running down my face, ignoring the mess, ignoring everything that wasn't the two of us. She began to mark the rhythm of my breathing, inhaling and exhaling slowly, her black eyes locked on mine like anchors in the middle of the storm. I clung to her, digging nails into her arms, transferring my pain to her skin, and she didn't complain, didn't pull away, just kept whispering she was there. In that moment, the hierarchy of mistress and maid, rich cousin and poor cousin, dissolved completely in the heat of that hospital room. We were just two women connected by the invisible thread of life, sharing the most visceral and human moment that exists. The hours dragged in slow torture, the clock on the wall mocking my sense of time, while pain became the only reality existing in the universe. The doctor came in and out, examining dilation with touches that felt like knives, talking about centimeters and progression with annoying calm. Catherine, who used to delegate anything unpleasant, didn't leave my side even to drink water, refusing to leave me alone with the monsters of pain. She wiped sweat from my forehead with a damp towel, wet my dry lips with ice chips, and massaged my lower back during contraction peaks. I saw tiredness in her eyes, deep dark circles forming. But she stood firm, a statue of vigilance and love. In a moment of calm between pains, I looked at her and saw she was crying silently, tears flowing without her noticing or caring to wipe them. "Why are you crying?" I asked with a weak voice, hoarse from moaning. "Because I cannot feel this for you," she replied with brutal honesty, squeezing my hand against her chest. "I would buy this pain if I could, Julia. I would pay any price to take this from you," she confessed. And I knew it was true. Her money, which bought clinics, houses, and silences, was useless there, and that impotence destroyed her inside. I smiled weakly and brought my hand to her face, wiping a tear with my trembling thumb. "You are helping me, just by being here. You are already sharing the weight," I whispered. Dawn turned to day, and sunlight invaded the room through cracks in the blinds, illuminating the scene of our private battle. I was exhausted, feeling my strength had run out, that I wouldn't manage to take the final step of that marathon. "I cannot do it anymore, Catherine. I want to go home." I started crying, entering the panic of transition, that moment when the mind gives up before the body. She held my face firmly, forcing me to face her. "You can do it. You are the strongest woman I know," she said with fierce conviction. "Think of him. Think of our boy. He wants to meet you. He wants to come to our arms," she encouraged, and again ours shone like a lighthouse in the darkness. The doctor entered the room with a serious expression and announced dilation was complete. It was time to push, to transform pain into life. I was prepped, legs placed in stirrups, medical team positioning like an army ready for final attack. Fear paralyzed me for a second. I knew pain would increase. My body would be torn. Everything would change from there. Catherine noticed my terror and leaned over me, whispering in my ear, her hoarse and intimate voice blocking the sound of metallic instruments. "I am here. Hold my hand. Break my fingers if you need to, but do not let go," she promised. The first order to push came, and I obeyed, screaming in an effort that seemed to rip out my insides, feeling unbearable pressure. Catherine screamed with me, rooting for me as if she were living it in her own body, face contorted in painful empathy. "Come on, Julia, a little more. I see him. He is coming," she exclaimed, voice choked with emotion, completely forgetting the Iron Lady posture. She had no disgust, no fear. She looked at birth with wonder, witnessing the dirty and sacred miracle her money couldn't manufacture. The final effort demanded every drop of energy left in my battered body. I closed my eyes, concentrating my entire existence on that push, feeling I was dying and being reborn at the same time. Catherine's hand was my only connection to Earth, the anchor preventing me from floating away into unconsciousness. I felt the relief of passage, pressure decreasing suddenly, followed by a second of silence that seemed to last an eternity. And then, the most beautiful sound in the world exploded in the room. A strong, shrill, life-filled cry, announcing the heir, our boy, had finally arrived. I collapsed on the bed, body trembling uncontrollably from adrenaline discharge, sweat soaking my hair and gown. I opened my eyes with difficulty and saw Catherine. She was paralyzed, hands covering her mouth, looking at the baby stained with blood and vernix the doctor held up high. She sobbed openly, without shame, without filters, destroyed and rebuilt by the sight of that small human being. She looked at me, and amidst tears I saw love so vast, so deep, and so real it took my breath away more than childbirth. There was no contract, no company, no past. In that hospital room, bathed in morning light and baby's cry, existed only the absolute present and certainty that nothing would separate us again. The baby's shrill cry ceased almost instantly as soon as they placed him on my naked chest, replaced by short, moist breathing that tickled my sweaty skin. That warm, tiny weight was the most real thing I had ever felt in my entire life. A biological anchor, keeping me tethered to Earth while my mind floated in postpartum exhaustion. He was covered in a white substance and stained with blood, slippery and fragile. But to me, he was the most magnificent creature that ever walked, or rather, lay on this planet. My arms wrapped around him in a protective instinct I didn't even know I possessed, and I lowered my head to smell the top of his little head, inhaling that ferrous, sweet scent of new life that no luxury perfumery at Lumiere could replicate. The world outside, with its rules, contracts, and money, had ceased to exist. The universe now boiled down to that square meter of the hospital bed. I raised eyes clouded by tears, and found Catherine standing beside the bed, hands suspended in the air, as if afraid to touch the sacred scene and break it with her profane presence. The woman who commanded empires and fired directors with a look was there, trembling, completely disarmed by the fragility of a newborn. She looked at the boy with desperate hunger, but her feet seemed glued to the floor, locked by insecurity that cut my heart. "Come, Catherine. He is ours," I called with a hoarse voice, extending an invitation that went far beyond holding the baby. It was an invitation to enter my life, our family, without reservations or contracts. She approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal or deity, and extended a trembling finger to touch the baby's closed little hand. The instant her skin touched his, I saw an electric shock run through her body, a visible shudder making her shoulders drop, releasing all tension accumulated in 9 months of rigid control. The baby, in an instinctive reflex, grabbed her index finger with surprising strength, trapping the great tycoon in his tiny trap. Catherine let out a loud sob, a sound that seemed ripped from the bottom of her soul, and covered her mouth with the other hand, crying with freedom I never imagined witnessing. "He is perfect, Julia. He is." "My God," she stammered, words coming out mixed with crying, makeup, if any remained, completely ruined. She leaned over us, wrapping me and the baby in a clumsy, love-filled hug, not caring about blood, sweat, or lack of hygiene of the moment. I felt her wet face against my neck, her tears mixing with mine, sealing a pact of blood and salt water worth more than any paper signed at a notary. We stayed there, two, heads touching, breathing the same air, while our son slept peacefully in the middle of the emotional chaos he had created. The medical team, realizing the intimacy of that moment, retreated discreetly, leaving us in a bubble of privacy, finishing procedures in respectful silence. Catherine finally raised her face, and her black eyes, usually so hard and impenetrable, were clear, shining with new, soft, terrified light. She looked at the baby, and then fixed her gaze on me, with intensity making me forget body pains and soul weariness. There was no professional gratitude in that look. There was adoration, deep reverence for the woman I was, for the strength I had demonstrated. "You gave me life today," she said, voice firm despite emotion. Not just his, but mine. I was dead, Julia. I was an empty shell full of money and loneliness, and you brought me back. She caressed my face with her thumb, wiping a strand of sweaty hair from my forehead with infinite tenderness. I looked at her, at that disheveled woman, with deep dark circles and wrinkled clothes, and had absolute certainty I had never seen anyone so beautiful. The love we felt, which we had tried to suffocate, hide, and deny, now overflowed, filling every corner of that aseptic room. Catherine took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to jump off a cliff, and held my free hand, squeezing it against her chest, where I could feel her heart beating out of rhythm. "The contract is over," she declared, and my heart stopped for a second, fear of farewell freezing my blood. "You fulfilled your part. You delivered the heir. But I cannot fulfill mine," she continued quickly, seeing panic in my eyes. "I cannot let you go, Julia. I cannot watch you walk out that door and be just the distant biological mother. I could not bear to live a single day in that mansion without your smell, without your mess, without your light." She knelt right there, on the cold hospital floor, ignoring dirt, ignoring lack of protocol, ignoring knee pain. Catherine, the woman who never bowed to anyone, was on her knees for her former employee. "I do not have a ring here. I do not have a romantic plan. I have nothing but me and this terrible fear of losing you," she said, looking up at me, vulnerable as a child. "I do not want just the baby. I want his mother. I want to wake up with you every day, want to fight with you about the diet, want to watch you grow old beside me." "Marry me, Julia," she asked, words coming out in an urgent breath. "Be my wife. Be the owner of that house, that company, and my heart. Because all that has been yours for a long time." I was paralyzed, looking at her, unable to process that the scene I had dreamed of so many times was happening there, in the rawest and most imperfect way possible. The love of my life was proposing to me while I held our newborn son, dirty and exhausted. And that was 1,000 times better than any candlelight dinner in Paris. "Yes," I replied in a whisper, because I had no voice to scream. "Yes, Catherine, 1,000 times yes." She let out a nervous, incredulous laugh and jumped up, leaning over the bed to kiss me. It wasn't a shy or contained kiss. It was a kiss of possession, relief, unbridled passion, where our mouths met with the urgency of someone who spent their whole life holding their breath. We kissed over our son's head, sealing our family with the taste of tears and hope, ignoring the world outside. When we separated, breathless, she rested her forehead on mine again, smiling like I had never seen her smile, a smile reaching her eyes and illuminating her whole face. "I love you," she confessed, saying the forbidden words for the first time out loud, finally freeing them. "I love you, Catherine," I replied, feeling deep peace settle in my chest, certainty that the fight was over. The contract had turned to ashes. Now, we had a whole lifetime to write our own rules. We looked together at the baby, who slept oblivious to the romantic drama happening over him. And Catherine put her arm around my shoulders, creating a protective shield around us. "Let's go home," she said. And this time, the word home didn't mean a building of concrete and glass. It meant the threes of us. It meant the future. And I knew, closing my eyes to rest in her arms, that the poor girl and rich cousin were left behind, giving way to two mothers in love who had just won the lottery of life. 3 years passed since that tumultuous morning at the hospital, and time, which once seemed to drag in months of endless pregnancy, now flew at the speed of a curious child's small steps. The mansion, once a silent temple of marble and glass where no one dared speak loud, now woke up every day to the sound of laughter and bare feet running through hallways. Catherine's aesthetic minimalism had lost the war to the colorful invasion of toys, children's books, and crooked drawings taped to the state-of-the-art refrigerator door. If someone told me, back when I was just the poor, indebted cousin, that one day I would see the powerful owner of Lumiere sitting on the living room rug building plastic block castles, I would say it was hallucination. But there she was, the Iron Woman, now with hair tied in a practical ponytail, negotiating with a 3-year-old boy about bath time, with patience she never had with her executive directors. I came down the stairs, finishing buttoning the blazer of my linen suit, ready for another day as director of operations, a position I occupied now not by contract or favor, but by pure confidence I earned studying and working beside her. I stopped in the middle of the stairs to observe the scene in the living room. Lucas, our son, ran in circles holding a wooden airplane, while Catherine tried, in vain, to put shoes on him. Morning light entered through huge windows, illuminating dust dancing in the air. Dust now allowed, proof that a real family lived there, and not wax figures. Catherine looked up and saw me, and that smile she gave me, full of complicity and domestic love, made my heart do the same jump it did at the beginning of our romance. "Good morning, love," she said, temporarily giving up on the shoes and getting up to greet me. She walked to me and gave me a quick peck, tasting of black coffee and toothpaste, a simple ritual worth more than any jewelry she could buy me. Lucas, seeing me, abandoned the plane and ran to hug my legs, shouting, "Mommy Julia," with that high-pitched voice that was the best music in my world. I picked our boy up, feeling his solid weight, smelling curly hair that was a genetic mix of hers with my influence of care, and felt overwhelming gratitude for staying, for saying yes in that hospital. Breakfast was now a happy mess, with toast crumbs on the table and occasionally spilled juice, far from the rigid etiquette of past silent dinners. Catherine read news on the tablet, but stopped every 2 minutes to wipe Lucas's mouth or answer one of his 1,000 questions about how the world worked. I watched her transformation with daily fascination. The relentless businesswoman still existed when she stepped out the door, but inside the house, she allowed herself to be human, vulnerable, and above all, happy. Dark circles of worry were gone, replaced by soft expression lines around eyes, marks of someone who smiles much more than frowns. "Today is our day," she reminded, winking at me over the coffee cup, referring to the anniversary of that night at the hospital, the date we chose to celebrate our symbolic marriage and birth of our family. "My mother is picking Lucas up at school and taking him to sleep at our house," she completed, with a mischievous shine in her eyes, promising a night where we wouldn't be mothers, just women. I felt a shiver down my spine, electric anticipation, because despite the tiring routine of work and motherhood, the flame between us had never diminished. On the contrary, It had matured and become a constant, welcoming fire. We left for work together, in the same car, but now I drove sometimes, or we went holding hands in the back seat, discussing company strategies or deciding dinner menu. At Lumiere, I was no longer the pregnant cousin. I was respected, feared by some and admired by many, having found my own voice and space in that empire. Catherine made a point of showing everyone we were partners in everything, correcting anyone who tried to treat me as subordinate, validating my position with the pride of someone who saw my potential before everyone else. Working beside her was a stimulating challenge, an intellectual dance where we completed each other. Her analytical coldness balanced by my human intuition. The day flew by between meetings and decisions, but there was a silent countdown in my head, waiting for the moment we would return home alone. When the workday ended, we dismissed the driver and drove back to the mansion under the orange late-afternoon sky, listening to our favorite playlist and talking about trivialities. The house was strangely silent without Lucas, an echo of the empty past. But now that silence wasn't of loneliness, it was of expectation, an empty stage waiting for main actors. Catherine locked the main door and activated the security system, isolating the outside world, ensuring nothing and no one would disturb us that sacred night. We went up to the room, the same room where it all started, but which now had photos of us on nightstands and mixed clothes in the closet. Catherine took off her blazer and high heels, letting out a long sigh of someone stripping off corporate armor to wear lover's skin. "I am going to prepare a bath for us," she announced, entering the master bathroom. And soon I heard the sound of water filling the whirlpool tub, mixed with the familiar smell of those essential oils that once were cause for tension and now were pure pleasure. I stayed in the room, taking off my own clothes slowly, looking in the mirror and seeing pregnancy marks on my belly, silver stretch marks I didn't hide anymore, for Catherine kissed them as if they were verses from a holy book. I entered the steamy bathroom and found Catherine submerged in foam, eyes closed and head resting on tub edge, beautiful and relaxed like a queen in her rest. I approached without making noise, but she felt my presence, opening black eyes that shone seeing me undressed, with same devouring hunger as the first time. "Get in," she invited, extending a wet hand, and I accepted, sliding into hot water, fitting my body between her legs, leaning my back on her chest. Contrast of my dark skin with her paleness was still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Sun and moon finally aligned in same sky. We stayed there for a long time, saying nothing, just feeling each other's breath, her hands caressing my arms and breasts underwater, washing away tiredness and worries. "Remember when you were afraid to touch me because of the contract?" I asked softly, playing with her fingers. Catherine laughed, a deep sound vibrating against my back. "I was afraid of falling in love and losing control. And that is exactly what happened," she admitted, kissing my wet shoulder. "It was the best mistake of my life," she whispered against my skin, and I turned in the tub to face her, our faces inches apart. The water was hot, but heat in her eyes was greater. I saw our whole history there. Cold office, pregnancy test, crying in rain, childbirth, Lucas's first smile. Everything we went through had brought us to that moment of absolute peace and latent desire. "I love you, Catherine," I said, and words were no longer new but never lost strength. "I love you, my Julia," she replied. And before she could finish sentence, I kissed her. Feeling night was just beginning, and we had plenty of time to celebrate luck of having survived ourselves. We got out of the bath with pink damp skin, wrapped in fluffy towels, and walked to the room where immense bed waited for us. Catherine turned off main lights, leaving only side lamps on, creating golden gloom transforming environment into sanctuary. She let towel fall to floor and stood before me, naked and proud, her 40-something years, now over 50. being just a number before timeless beauty she possessed. "Today I want to take care of you," she said, pushing me gently to bed, her eyes promising adoration going far beyond physical. I lay down, feeling soft sheet on back, and watched woman of my life come over me, not as domineering businesswoman, but as passionate wife wanting to map every inch of my body with her mouth. Surrogacy contract had created a life, but love born from it had saved two. And that night, without child crying or phones ringing, we were going to renew our vows in most primitive and sacred way existing. Skin on skin, soul on soul, lost and found in each other until dawn. The room was plunged in golden gloom, lit only by soft light of lamps creating dancing shadows on walls, transforming our bed into private universe isolated from world. Catherine hovered over me, black hair falling like silk curtains separating us from reality, eyes fixed on mine with devotion making my heart skip beats. She was in no hurry. Her hands traveled my body with patience of someone knowing every map, every scar, and every point of sensitivity, claiming every inch of skin as her sacred property. She kissed my neck, going down slowly over my chest, stopping to adore silver marks on my belly, same stretch marks she once feared, and now treated as poetry verses written on my flesh. I interlaced my fingers in her hair, pulling her lightly, feeling wonderful weight of her body on mine, contrast of her cold skin with my feverish heat. Catherine whispered things I could barely understand, promises of eternity mixed with profane compliments, her hoarse voice vibrating against my ribs and sending shockwaves to my womb. The businesswoman, untouchable iron lady, was on her knees in bed, stripped of any pride, dedicated entirely to purpose of giving me pleasure, making me feel most loved woman on earth. She slid body down, kissing path between my breasts and navel, and I arched back, surrendered, vulnerable and powerful at same time. When her mouth continued to descend, crossing border of my waist, I closed my eyes and let a moan escape. Sound swallowed by wet kiss she deposited on inner thigh. Her hands held my hips firmly, anchoring me to mattress, while she dedicated herself to exploring me with hunger seeming insatiable, her tongue finding forbidden and secret places with mastery making me lose breath. There was no shame, no hesitation. There was only raw desire and spiritual connection of two souls fusing through physical touch. Every movement of hers was declaration of love. Every caress was apology for months of coldness. Every touch was celebration of our survival. The world spun and unraveled in colors and sensations, my body reacting with spasms of pleasure I couldn't and didn't want to control. My hands gripping Egyptian cotton sheets as if they were only solid thing in universe. Catherine seemed to know exactly what I needed before I even asked, reading my accelerated breathing as if it were musical score she knew how to play with eyes closed. Intimacy between us was overwhelming, mixture of lust and tenderness burning and healing at same time, erasing any trace of insecure girl I once was. I called her name, whisper turning into muffled scream and pillow, while she took me to edge of sanity, making me forget where my body ended and hers began. At peak of climax, when everything exploded in white heat wave, I felt tears run down corners of my eyes, tears of happiness so intense it hurt physically. Catherine felt my release and moved up my body in quick, fluid motion, covering my mouth with hers in hungry, deep, post-climax kiss, drinking my moans and sharing my panting breath. Our tongues met in slow, lazy rhythm, tasting our passion, sealing that moment with intimacy going far beyond sex. We stayed there, embraced, hearts beating out of rhythm against each other, sweaty and tangled in sheets, while breathing returned to normal in accomplice silence of room. She laid head on my chest, and I started caressing her hair, feeling absolute peace invade environment. that feeling of fullness existing only after perfect storm. Catherine, woman who controlled everything, now slept or pretended to sleep in my arms, trusting me with her rest, her guard down, her exposed heart. I looked at room ceiling and remembered first night I spent in that house, afraid she would enter through door. Today, my only fear was she would leave. Life had taken cruel and wonderful turns, transforming cold surrogacy contract into most unlikely and true love story I could live. The clock on wall marked late hours of morning, and I knew soon sun would rise. Lucas would wake up at Grandma's full of energy. Company would need us. Routine would turn again. But, in that moment suspended in time, none of that mattered. We were just Julia and Catherine. Two. Women who defied odds, society, and own traumas to build home on emotional wreckage. Childbirth scar on my body wasn't mark of service rendered, but war trophy. Proof we fought together to bring life to world, and, in process, gave life to ourselves. Catherine stirred, nestling closer, and murmured a sleepy, "I love you," against my skin. Hoarse, low voice still causing shivers. I kissed top of her head and closed eyes, feeling finally, after so many years of struggle and survival, I was exactly where I should be. We were no longer rich cousin and poor cousin, mistress and maid, contractor and surrogate. We were wife and wife, mother and mother, sun and moon orbiting in same sky. Dawn began to paint sky outside with shades of pink and orange, filtering through curtains and illuminating her serene face, revealing real beauty no makeup or aesthetic procedure could imitate. Beauty of being loved. I knew we would have challenges. World outside would continue to judge us. Routine would try to wear us down. But I looked at our hands interlaced on her chest and knew we were invincible. Love, feeling Catherine feared so much and I sought so much, had won all clauses, broken all contracts, and rewritten our destiny with golden letters. I squeezed her hand lightly, and she squeezed back even sleeping, unconscious reflex saying, "I am here. I am not going anywhere." I smiled at emptiness of room, feeling quiet, solid happiness fill my chest, certainty my desperate bet on that rainy bus had been worth it. I had sold my womb, but in exchange had won whole world in form of that woman and that boy. Story of our contract had ended long ago. Story of our life was just beginning, and I could hardly wait to turn next page beside her. I closed my eyes, letting sleep take me, lulled by sound of her breathing, an absolute certainty that in end, love is only business really worth closing. And so, in bed that once was cold and lonely, we fell asleep warmed by flame we lit together, ready to face any future, as long as we were holding hands. We have reached the end of this emotional journey of love, overcoming and breaking barriers. If you followed Julia and Catherine's story this far and felt your heart beat faster with this family's redemption, I have a special request for you. Subscribe now to the channel Forbidden Romances, activate the bell, and help us reach the goal of 2,000 subscribers, so we can continue bringing deep stories like this one. And if you reach the end of this audio, I want to know who the true romantics are, who stayed with us until the last second. Write down below in the comments the phrase, "I believe in the power of love." I will like and reply to the comment of every one of you who proves that true love still has space in the world. Until the next story,